Before Thanos, before Wakanda, before Hydra, Mary Poppins, the Guardians, Thor, and Loki, there was him.
Kill power.
I don't need to explain how everything Marvel's accomplished rests on the shoulders of Iron Man, but this 2008 film was honestly one of the very first to nail the superhero genre while the genre was in its infancy. So how'd they pull it off? Let's start with the setting. When you're dealing with more fantastical tales, it's helpful to ease the audience into the fantastical by starting at a more relatable place. Many movies do this by showing our young hero in high school or relying on that as a relatable, if not kinda cliche, starting point. But this is something screenwriter Philippa Boyens explains about Lord of the Rings. We don't start with the Balrogs, elves, fell beasts, and giant armies. We start in what might be described as a 17th century English countryside. It's a relatable and comfortable way to introduce the audience to the world before moving on to the more extreme and fantastic visuals. Iron Man starts by really grounding it in the current conflict, something on the audience's mind that they'd been seeing on the news each day, the war in Iraq. It's a really effective way to ground the story and strengthen the suspension of disbelief. We don't start with tentacled aliens or looming spaceships. We start with some Humvees in a desert. And you know what? You want some wish fulfillment? Forget blasting aliens or pounding kidnappers when you could fly to Iraq and blast some terrorists.
Time to show good how it's gonna be done. Watch yourself.
Good job. Good job. Good job. Good job.
Oh! Hey, good! Oh, yeah! Hey, wait! Oh, yeah! Woo-hoo! That's how it go! Yeah, buddy!
Good job.
But maybe just as necessary to the story is the grounding and believability of Iron Man himself. The Iron Man suit is not just aesthetically pleasing, it's at least somewhat believable, and kinda looks like a top-secret design from Lockheed. This believability is somewhat lessened in later movies when they moved on to the more sleek nanotech suits that just didn't look as bulky, tactile, and realistic as the earlier models. Connected to this, and just as important, is that his powers are clearly defined. It's hard to gauge tension in a fight scene if you have no idea what the hero is or isn't capable of. Where precisely do Captain Marvel's powers end? How do we describe them? Flight, strength, and glowing blasting power? How much glowing blasting power? We have to rely on the writers to tell us when she's struggling, because we don't know when that's supposed to be. Spider-Man is clearly defined. He has strength, heightened senses, webcasting, and swinging. He's tough but not impervious to bullets and the like. We clearly know his limits, and it informs the tension of the conflicts. While they managed to make a pretty good first movie from Doctor Strange, he's not totally out of the weeds for the struggle, since the limits of his powers are not always clearly defined. But Iron Man makes it very clear what he's impervious to and what his weapons are. But like any good superhero, it's the wits and wisdom of the wielder of the suit that matter in the end. Director Jon Favreau also didn't want Iron Man to simply start flying. He drew out the process to emphasize the emotion and the relatably human wish fulfillment of unobstructed flight.
It was about how do you really viscerally make you feel as though you're flying? We've all dreamt about flying. How exciting is one of those dreams? It's never boring. I think just the feeling of flying for the first time in a movie like this, if you handle it right, should give you chills. It should be an emotional experience. And then when you fight the bad guy, even more fun. But don't blow past that stuff. What's it really like? What would it really be like to get in a suit that could fly? It would be a life-changing experience. Don't lose sight of that. You're making a movie. And movies are about emotion. They're about allowing the audience to experience something they can't in real life. The hope is to ground this thing in reality wherever we can, because it's so superhuman. These heroes are so large.
When it comes to the overall crafting of the story, I also think Alex at Indie Film Hustle may have been spot on when mentioning that it probably helped that Iron Man was a little more obscure than heavy hitters like Batman, Superman, and others. These cultural icons come with massive expectations from the audience for each adaptation, but by starting without the crushing audience expectations, Jon Favreau and the team were able to work in a little more silence and surprise the audience with a fresh take on a different hero. Ultimately, no, I'm not pretending that the Iron Man movie is some landmark achievement of film history, but it's a great story, and looking at the number of good films that get made, that's an achievement in and of itself, especially considering the infancy of the superhero genre when it was made. One can only hope that future superhero films will take notes and be as grounded and clearly defined as Iron Man. For better or for worse, Iron Man was instrumental in changing the entire film landscape, and it all started with...
I am Iron Man.
Wait, I think it really started with...
Don't waste a life.